England have somehow made it to the European final for the second time in a row. I don't know how many people expected that, especially after the start they had at these Euros, because it was a pretty underwhelming group stage. But it's a team that has actually grown quite a lot as the competition has gone forward. And arguably their best game of football was played against the Netherlands, at least the first 35 minutes. But it's going to be an uphill battle for England, and it's not going to be easy for Spain. But Spain have undoubtedly been the best team in this competition. I think that was pretty evident from the moment they kicked off against Croatia in their first 3-0 win of the tournament. It just showed to everyone that they meant business. They meant serious business with this new look Spanish team that a lot of us hadn't really got much of a glimpse at in previous competitions because they went out quite early to unexpected teams. I think it was Japan in the World Cup that they went out to in the previous competition, but they've definitely made it this far for a specific reason. They have a lot of talented players and they're not going to make it easy for England in the slightest. But I also don't think England are going to just simply fold over. And on paper, when you look at both teams' players and their potential lineups, I think England really stand a good chance against this Spanish team. And I can see that from the poll that we have in the chat that a lot of you feel the same. We've got England at 57%, 56% as the poll is going on. So England's slight favourites going into this match, although that is dropping quickly as more Spanish people probably join the stream, or more European people, because it does feel like we are outnumbered, us English fans. It does feel like the whole of Europe wants to see us lose. But yeah, I'm curious to know what you guys think. How far do you think both teams are, how do you think the game is going to go? Do you think Spain are going to dominate the match, or do you think England really do stand a good chance against this Spanish team? Personally, we're going to jump into the lineups. We're going to look at different teams, and we're going to look at how England could potentially line up against this Spanish team. I think Spain have a slightly more set in stone formation and key players. Obviously, they had to rotate quite a lot against France because of injuries and certain players being absent because of qualifications. But England have been pretty consistent, and knowing Gareth Southgate, I doubt we're going to see any major changes going into the final, even though some players coming off the bench have really impressed. And that is a key word right there, the bench. I do generally think England have a really, really good bench, and that's where there could be a key for England in this match. Because if you look at the players on the bench, I generally think England have a much better chance at disrupting this Spanish team when you look at how the game might progress into the second half, or even into extra time if it goes that far. So, Thomas, you're Portuguese. You don't want to see England win. I do think generally a lot of people want to see England lose, which makes it all the more fun and all the more exciting because we know what it's like to be English. We want to be outnumbered and we want to prove everyone wrong. So, thank you all so much for joining. We've got some familiar faces. We've got some familiar names in the chat. Thank you all so much for joining. If you haven't, please leave a like on the stream. It really helps. And we're going to be jumping straight into the lineups and predicted lineups. But I want to get to know your thoughts. Which players do you think are going to start? Before we jump into any in-depth analysis, if there's any specific players you think are going to have a standout performance in this match. So, Ali, England stand a good chance, but it will take unbelievable discipline from defensive mids and defenders to stop ball progression down the middle. And that's one of the first things I actually want to highlight. So, let's look at the starting formations, because this is where the game's going to be won or lost. It's not down to the managers and tactics. It's who you have on the pitch and what can they do together. And I think England won't rotate much. Now, there's obviously a lot of positions for England that have been called into question throughout these Euros. We have Trippier, for example, who a lot of people want Luke Shaw to start. And personally, I do want Luke Shaw to start in this position as well, because he's the starting left back. He's much better in this position. He can be a lot more dangerous going forward, and he's left-footed. So, you know, he wants to hug the touchline and push forward. But I still think Southgate is going to start with Trippier and maybe use Luke Shaw like he did against the Netherlands. Maybe have him come on in the second half as he did against the Netherlands, even though he didn't have a massive impact against the Netherlands. But that was mostly down to how the game unfolded, because Netherlands, they wanted to defend really, really deep, and they didn't really give England much space to push forward, and they just made it really difficult for England to get their fullbacks involved in the in the second half. But then in the centre, so since England have switched to a back three, their performances have improved significantly, especially against the Netherlands, but also against Switzerland. There were some signs of improvement. Obviously, it wasn't their best performance. They still struggled in a lot of areas, but it was looking better and it was looking a little bit more cohesive. And I do think a lot of that is down to the double pivot of Declan Rice and Mainoo. Mainoo has been outstanding for England. Again, like I said in my recent analysis that I did on England and their match against the Netherlands, I didn't know much about Mainoo. I saw a couple games against Man City in the FA Cup and he looked good, but I wasn't sold. But now I hold my hands up. I'm completely sold. He looks unbelievable. And I genuinely think he will be a key player for England, especially in the defensive phase, trying to close down these players. We've already seen the matchup of Rodri and Mainoo, and it definitely was in Mainoo's favour in the FA Cup. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's a key player between the lines in the counter press like he was against the Netherlands, and really, really helps England get on the front foot during this match. Then we have the two attacking midfielders of Bellingham and Foden. Again, I think these players are going to start. I really think there's a little chance that Southgate's going to change these two players. And it worked well against the Netherlands, especially in the first half before the Netherlands changed their formation and tried to adapt to this English system. But it worked well, and I think they can be dangerous, especially because they like to change position quite consistently. Maybe they should attack forward a little bit more frequently, but it's a very fluid and dynamic rotation that they have, because you often get Bellingham hugging the touchline, similar positions that he occupies when he plays for Real Madrid. You also have Foden coming over, trying to create a little bit of a cluster on either side of the pitch. And then the big talking point for England, which is who starts up top. I want to know what you guys think, if England should drop Harry Kane and play with Watkins after his incredible cameo in the match against the Netherlands, coming on and just instantly winning the game for England just after 10 minutes with Cole Palmer as well. And obviously, this is what formation I think Southgate is going to go with, but it's not the formation I personally would go with. But I think we know at this point of the competition, Southgate isn't going to make too many changes, especially in this stage of the match. But I would love to see Watkins up top for Harry Kane, because I think he just offers England so much more going forward, attacking the defensive line. I don't know how long it's been. How long have we been watching England? But Kane, I don't think he's made a run in behind the whole competition. Now, we know what Kane likes to do. He does drop deep and is very effective at picking up the ball in these positions and then shifting it out wide. But against a team like Spain, I think their defense is their weakness, personally. I think there are opportunities for England to attack and find gaps that they can definitely move down. It's not going to be easy, because they have this general in the centre here, Rodri, that does protect the back four extremely effectively. But there is some space that I think England can exploit. And we're going to be looking at that when we look at both teams' offensive and defensive tactics. So obviously, yeah, I would like to see Watkins, but I don't think Watkins is going to start. So yeah, I can see in the chat as well, some of you are saying Watkins should start for England. But again, yeah, I think we've all come to the conclusion that it's going to be Kane up top. And then Saka on the right as well. Obviously, I do love Cole Palmer. I really want to see him play. I think he definitely will come on later on in the match, but Saka is almost certainly going to start. And defensively speaking, Saka has been really good for England as well. He has helped them, especially against the Netherlands as well, when they had Gakpo and other players pushing up into these positions. Saka was very disciplined defensively, and he liked to drop deep. This combination with Walker and Mainoo and Foden over here was quite good and solid. And England, they might not have been the best offensive team at these Euros, but defensively speaking, they have been relatively consistent. Obviously, the goal against the Netherlands was a little bit of a fluke. It came from when Netherlands didn't really have much going on the game. It came when England were in total control of the match, really. But there's other situations where England have defended well, and I think that could be a strong point for England in this match. So, we're going to be looking at a few clips from the match against France and Germany as well, and just get a couple of examples. But let's look at Spain as well, because I think Spain's formation is going to be a little bit more consistent. They've kept to a 4-3-3 basically for the whole competition, and we know who their key players are. They have Yamal and Williams up top, who have been on fire for the whole competition. And even though they lost Pedri, Dani Olmo has arguably been even better in some occasions. He's been one of the standout players for Spain in this position, doing a lot of what Pedri was doing before his injury, but maybe even a little bit more aggressive going forward, and we do see that with the amount of goals and assists that he's already getting for the team. And then Fabian Ruiz, obviously extremely dangerous for Spain as well, really dynamic, dropping deep and attacking forward, and the combination with Rodri does give them a lot of solidity and a lot of options in the middle. And then the back four as well. So we've had the only option here that I think might be up for grabs is Lenormand or Nacho in the center. Although Lenormand was disqualified in the semi-final, which is why I didn't start. But I do think he is the starting center back. I'm curious to know if you guys have any more information on Spain's back line, if these are the players that they're definitely going to start with. But it's definitely going to be Laporte, Cucurella, and Carvajal, because Carvajal is going to be back in the team as well. Even though Jesus Navas did play really, really well against France in this position, and the combination with the fullback and the winger is something that we're definitely going to be analysing now, because it's quite dangerous. So these are the starting formations. I think these are what both managers are going to go for. But again, I'm curious to see if you guys have any other ideas on what players might work better and what substitutions both teams can make. Because again, I think from the bench, England have so many more options compared to Spain. And I do think that's where England could get an advantage late on in the game if they can hold on, if they can defend well in the wide regions where Spain like to attack and create these overloads and clusters of players. I generally do think England stand a chance in this match and can create some dangerous opportunities as well going forward. So let's start with what Spain like to do with the ball and how England could potentially counter this during this match. So Spain have had a pretty different build-up style compared to other teams in this competition. Now, by far the most common build-up structure at these Euros has been a back three, which is what England have been using with Gay, Stones and Walker. France used the back three. Germany used the back three. So many teams, the Netherlands were using a back three. So many different teams wanted to build with 3 players, and then you'd have maybe 2 in the center or even 1 sometimes. Germany would often keep even 1. But Spain, they've been building with a back 4 essentially, or even a back 2, depending on how you want to consider the fullbacks in this position. But by having their fullbacks like really out wide during the first phase of build-up, it instantly makes it a lot harder for the defending team to press, especially England. If we look at how they're going to want to press, England haven't been the most aggressive pressing team at these Euros, and I doubt they're going to go extremely aggressive against this Spanish team, and they do need to be careful because Spain can very quickly create overloads and find players between the lines that makes it very difficult to keep track of and different movements. You have players like Morata that like to drop deep quite a lot. Fabian Ruiz can attack forward. Olmo can attack forward and drop deep. So many different rotations and things that they need to look out for. But I do think that England's back 3 matches up quite well against Spain's attacking 3 and with the rotations that they have in the offensive third as well. So if we look at Spain in possession, again, because of the deep position of the fullbacks, they often hold the ball in these positions here. With Laporte, Lenormand, they're very good at controlling possession. Now, it instantly puts the defending team in 2 minds because Spain have a free player out wide, which is their fullback. With Cucurella. So you got a lot of times, this happened countless times with France, countless times with Germany. They instantly just wanted to close down this player. And then you'd have the striker that would close down here, and they'd be, okay, we're kind of matched up man for man. But then you have these other players as well that like to move over. So, for example, if they are attacking down the left flank, these spaces are the most dangerous area that Spain like to attack and will attack because they've done that in every single game so far at the Euros, and there's a high chance that they're still going to be doing the same thing against England because it's just how they play. They want to move the ball into these areas here because they know they can create a lot of dangerous opportunities once the ball reaches here. So how do you stop this type of attack? So like we said, if Foden predicts the pass out wide, then you've instantly lost because you instantly free up the pass forward in between the lines for a Spanish player. So maybe Foden hugs the more central position, forces play out wide into the fullback, and then moves over like this. And this way you do kind of limit them a little bit more because then the only option Cucurella has is a ball down line or back to Laporte, and it does make it a little bit easier for England to stop these types of situations if they're able to force them out wide. But as we know, Spain do like to rotate a lot of their players. So we do need to be careful because even though Spain are attacking, for example, in this situation, they're attacking on the left flank, Dani Olmo is not just going to stay in this position out here. He's definitely going to move more centrally along with Morata, Fabian Ruiz, and we have Rodri as well. And we've got a lot of examples, and I'm going to show you a little clip that I prepared from some examples that Spain have been using. Let me just find the right one. So we've got these clusters of players that they like to create. For example, in this example here, we have Cucurella out wide, we have Williams in the center, we have Morata, we have Fabian Ruiz, we've got Dani Olmo. All the players have shifted over to the left side of the pitch, and they can create these massive overloads in possession and make it really, really difficult for any team to find space. Because if you force all your players over to try and stop these attacks, then what you saw with Spain is that they want to switch play, and they find a lot of space with Yamal and Jesus Navas in this situation on the opposite flank that they can attack down. And once the ball does end on the opposite flank, then the 2v1s against the fullback can be really, really dangerous. So these overloads are an important thing that Spain do, and something that England will have to pay attention to and try and stop because it's not easy. I've seen teams try and counter it in different ways, but if you commit too many players to this overload on one side of the pitch, then they're just going to hit you on the other side. But if you don't commit enough players, then they're just going to play it through you and go down the line. So England need to be disciplined. They need to get close to their players. They need to get close to Morata, to Olmo, to Williams. All these players that want to receive the ball between the lines, they can't give them time to make a decision. And we can see if against France, for example, once they did switch play, then Spain can find these overloads on the opposite flank as well. Or not really overloads, but it would often be a 2v1 against Hernandez, against France, for example, and forcing Mbappe to pick up a pretty deep position and try and level out on the opposite flank. But with the overlaps on the opposite flank, it's going to be really difficult for England to stop. So if we go back to the board, we can see these clusters on the pitch, and then England do need to be careful, because if the ball makes it over to this side, I think there might be a weakness with Trippier. If it is Trippier starting, these overloads can be extremely dangerous. Now, overloads aren't the only way that Spain want to create their chances. As we've seen, they want to move the ball into these positions here, and lots of different players can pick up the ball. We often get Morata dropping deep. Sometimes it's Williams that frees up the space for Cucurella to overlap. Lots of different options, even Fabian Ruiz. Rodri is quite aggressive as well. You often see him even pick up these balls if he has a little bit more cover in the center. He's not afraid to push forward as well, and he can be really, really dangerous in these positions as well. He's not the most offensive midfielder. He does want to protect the defense a little bit more, so he's a bit more dangerous from deeper positions. But if he does have the ball here, then England, again, they need to be quick at closing these players down. And again, the combination of Mainoo and Rodri, we've seen it before, and potentially Mainoo could have another great game against arguably the best holding midfielder in the game, which is Rodri. So in other situations where maybe teams have been able to stop these overloads and they're not allowing Spain to create these clusters of players on one side of the pitch, Spain still want to attack centrally a lot. And these central overloads can be created in different ways. And again, they're really clever about the way they go about it. If it's Harry Kane up top, you're likely going to end up with a 2v1 with the centre backs. So it's going to be difficult to predict what type of press England want to adopt. Because if you push too many players forward, then we see what happens, and they can just find space out wide to move it forward. But if you don't commit too many players, then it's going to be too easy for Spain to just control the game, because Harry Kane, he's not the quickest, he's not the best at putting pressure. So this 2v1 here could be difficult for England to counter, especially because you want to put pressure on Rodri. You don't want to allow these players to have much space in the center. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe it's Kane and Bellingham or Kane and Foden up top, and they go man for man in the center. And it's here where then the back five for England could be a little bit more effective, because Trippier maybe is more aggressive on Carvajal, and then you have Gueye on Yamal, Walker on Williams, and Saka on Cucurella. I think that makes a little bit more sense on the left or on the right for England, because Saka is a little bit more aggressive, so he pushes forward a bit more consistently. And Williams and Walker could work quite well, because Williams is obviously extremely quick, but Walker's good. He's very good at recovery runs, so he could. I feel like this duel could work quite well. Curious to know what you guys think as well. So yeah, I've seen a lot of support for Spain, and the poll for Spain has increased in popularity. And I think, again, it does seem like the vast majority of people want to see England lose. Pie and Mash versus Tapas, Big A. How you doing, Ade? Good to see you. I don't think England press nearly at all, says Ali. I think England will sit back. I think it will be difficult for England to press this Spanish team, because you don't want to get caught in behind. If you press too aggressively, they're going to catch you with Olmo and Ruiz, and it's not easy to level out the center of the pitch. And then if Spain are able to pick up the ball between the lines, let's say it's Ruiz, he's able to make it past Mainoo, for example, then in these situations is where they can be so dangerous. For example, against France in their match, there are a couple of examples of Spain attacking through the center of the pitch. So they did this quite a lot with Nacho or Laporte as well. They were really good at driving forward. And once you drive forward into these positions, then the defense has a choice to make, because you have so much width in Williams and Yamal out wide. So what does the defense do? Does it compact its shape and try and stop any plays through the middle to Morata, for example? Or do you stay narrow and allow them with more space out wide, which is exactly what happened in this match? France wanted to keep a pretty compact defensive line, and Spain really didn't attack much through the middle. There weren't very many through balls in this match, but a lot of progression did happen out wide with Yamal, for example, like the clip that we just saw. As the ball goes out wide, then it does free up a lot of space. So, for example, in this situation here, as the ball goes out over to the left, because the defense was tight and they have to push out to close out the Williams in this situation, then it leaves players like Ruiz with space to attack forward in the half space. So, again, lots of things that England need to pay attention to and defend correctly, because the overloads out wide are going to be dangerous, but this central progression that Spain want to have in the first phase of play is going to be a key thing that England need to stop and need to pay attention to. But again, if we look at England's midfield of Declan Rice and Mainoo, I do think that they are able to stop these players in Dani Olmo and Ruiz. Like, man for man, I think their pressure is good. They're not going to allow these players to have much time on the ball. And even if Spain are able to push their fullbacks forward, as we do like to see them switch to a front five towards the end of the match, or towards the end of their attacks, when they have a little bit more control of the pitch, they do like to get their fullbacks forward because they can rely on the back three of Lenormand, Laporte, and Rodri. I think in the centre, England again can cover, and it does work quite well, because if you have Trippier on Carvajal, Gay on Yamal, Stones, you do have a man-for-man matchup at the back. And in these situations, Saka against Cucurella, maybe Cucurella can't even push too far up the pitch, because if he does, then England can be dangerous on the counter-attack. We saw it with France as well. If France were able to get the ball, they had a lot of space on the opposite flank to create chances with counter-attacks. But even against Georgia, for example, Spain really struggled in that match, especially at the start. They were about, when they were 1-0 down, it could have gone 2-1 or it could have gone 2-0 for Georgia in that match, because they were so good at counterattack, so good at regaining the ball, switching to the opposite flank on the diagonal, and they had so much space to push forward. Because if Spain do want to commit a lot of players to one side of the pitch, yes, it works in possession, but if you lose possession, then you're kind of screwed, because there's so much space on the opposite flank, and England do have quick players. Trippier can push forward. Kane, obviously, in these situations, is probably not going to attack him behind, but he could be a good player to drop off the line, pick up the ball, and then switch it one more time into Trippier or Luke Shaw, or whoever plays on the left flank. So again, curious to know what you guys are thinking about these player combinations. What do you think about Yamal versus Trippier? If that's something that's going to work well, or it's going to be dangerous? I think it's going to be more Trippier on Carvajal, Gay on Yamal, depending on how aggressive England want to go. And if Carvajal doesn't push forward a lot, then obviously this is going to be the combination, and England can very quickly create 2v1s against Yamal or go against Williams. So for it to work, Spain are definitely going to need to push their fullbacks forward, because if they don't, then England do have these 2v1s with Williams and Walker, with Walker and Saka, Trippier and Gay on this side, and then Stones against Morata. I trust Stones to have a good game against Morata. We've seen it before. I think he's a good man marker. He can cover these runs. Morata obviously likes to drop a little bit deeper, and in the cases in which Morata will drop deep, then we need to be careful for the runs of Olmo and Ruiz in behind. But again, I think Rice and Mainoo could be disciplined and make sure that this doesn't happen too frequently. So again, what do you guys think of Spain's tactics? Do you think they're going to do something different? So Manuel, Spain picked apart the best defense in the tournament, France. So I think personally France were one of the best defensive teams because they didn't really concede much, but I don't know. There was something about this French team that never really sat right with me, even defensively speaking. They did play well, but I think there were just a lot of issues in this team. It just felt like they just weren't really gelling very well. And I'm not surprised Spain won. I think that the toughest game for Spain was definitely going to be Germany. And it did feel like a little bit of a final, that game, didn't it? Because Spain and Germany, they were arguably the two best teams in the competition. So I think in a way we were robbed of a final. But I mean, I wasn't robbed of a final because England made it. And I think England will play well. I don't want to say it too much. I don't want to jinx it. But I don't think it's as easy as everyone is making it out to be. Just because Spain have played really, really well up to now, I think England can show their own in this match. And it was weird. I was watching a video, I think it was Sky Sports, and they were reporting in Spain, and they were trying to pass it off as if Spain weren't the favourites for this match. But we all know that's not true. Spain are obviously the favourites because of their form, because of players like Yamal and Williams that have just been on fire in this competition. They have one of the best holding midfielders in the game. I think they were just trying to switch it up a little bit and not make it seem too easy for Spain or too dramatic if they weren't able to win this game. So defensively speaking, what do you guys think? Do you think England need to press high up the pitch? Or do you think they need to sit back and make sure that they can't get caught in behind or between the lines. Again, I think the space between the lines is going to be crucial, which is why Rice and Mainu are going to be extremely important in this match, and that we're going to need a lot of discipline at the back. So, Satyam, if England sit back so much, will they win? Well, we've seen other teams that have sat back against Spain, and it hasn't been too bad for them because they've been able to find space on counterattacks on the opposite flank. But I think England will sit back at times. But also, we've seen England, when they have the ball, they want to control possession. They want to attack forward. They want to create opportunities. They're maybe not the best at creating opportunities because there's something lacking a little bit in the final third. Essentially, when you look at England as well, they only play with 2/3 of the pitch because Trippier is always a little bit late on his overlaps. There's a lot of opportunities against the Netherlands where you didn't really have many players on the left making overlaps. So you're kind of restricted to one side of the pitch when you're looking at England, depending on who plays, because if Shaw plays, then obviously you have a little bit more options. But I think if England can defend well, maybe there's an initial onslaught from this Spanish team that they want to gain control of the match instantly. I think England can grow in this match. So, Ollie, if England don't concede for 45 minutes, frustrate Spain, then bring the pace on 5 minutes to go, 3-0 England. Maybe I would love to see changes earlier on in the game. I don't know how you guys feel about that as well, but personally, the changes from Southgate, in my opinion, have been a little bit too slow. Obviously, can't say too much because they've worked quite consistently throughout these Euros. But it would be nice to see Palmer and Watkins, if he does come on off the bench and doesn't start, it would be nice to see them come on a little bit earlier in the match, especially when these English players are starting to fatigue. And also, I don't want to see English players protected for no reason at all. So in the game against Netherlands, for example, I don't think Bellingham had the best game. I think he started okay. Foden was definitely the better player between Bellingham and Foden in that match. But Bellingham, it did seem like he was protected and Southgate didn't want to take him off. Again, the substitution did work with Foden coming off, but I don't know. I want to see if a player's not playing well, then change it because you have so much talent on the bench that can create dangerous opportunities. So let's look at England. Let's see what England can do going forward and different types of avenues they're likely to explore, because we've seen two different types of England at this competition. We've seen the pretty boring defensive mentality England that got them through the group stages but didn't really set the world alight. And then we saw this more aggressive, more determined England against the Netherlands, which again, once the Netherlands figured out what England were doing and tried to level out the centre, it made it a little bit harder for them to find space in the middle. But we've definitely seen that England can be dangerous if they find the right space. Now, it's going to be difficult, mostly down to Spain's press as well, because it's something that you don't really talk about too much when you look at this Spanish team because you think they're so good going forward. But defensively speaking, they have been extremely solid as well. And the press from the front three players of Morata, Yamal and Williams has been really, really effective. Ruiz and Olmo in the centre also working really, really hard. Pedri as well was excellent in the defensive phase. But defensively speaking, Spain are a difficult team to overcome. And that's because when you look at how teams have been defending at these Euros, especially against teams that build with a back three, it's very common to see maybe the team switch to a front two pressing shape. So it's the same thing that the Netherlands did to try and level out the center. So essentially, you can end up with a 3v2 in the first phase, and then maybe you have a 4-4-2 in the center. That makes it a little bit harder for the teams to find space in the middle. But what Spain do, and why Spain have been quite dangerous in these Euros as well, is they keep to their 4-3-3 pressing shape even out of possession. So they kind of go man for man in the first phase, depending on how deep the fullbacks or the wingbacks are in these situations. But by going man for man, I think there could be an advantage for England, because in that situation, if we just consider the numbers in the center, you do end up with a 4v3 situation in the middle of the pitch. Now, different ways Spain could counter this. There's different ways that the Netherlands went about this when England had this overload. But I think Spain, they are more keen in pushing one of their centre-backs forward. So if you look at, I don't have any examples available, but if you look at how they defend from goal kicks, for example, Lenormand or Laporte are very comfortable maybe leveling out the centre. So for example, Laporte could push up onto Foden, and then you kind of keep the back three ready with the fullbacks, one centre-back, and then the fullbacks covering the wingbacks or the wingers in this situation. So that is one way that they could try and level out the centre. But again, I think this could play into England's hands, because with players like Kane that like to drop deep, regardless of what you think about Kane dropping deep, if you think it's effective or not effective, it is something that can work at times. And if it's done effectively, he can create a lot of dangerous opportunities. So, for example, if Spain break the defensive line with Laporte pushing up onto Foden, and Kane also breaks his defensive line, picking up the ball here, and Lenormand drops deep, then you suddenly have a lot of avenues that you can explore with players pushing forward. And we know England are very comfortable pushing players forward. We've seen it in their game against Netherlands. They were very cautious at the start of the Euros. They didn't want to push too many players up top because it did look like they just wanted to defend as much as possible. But if they have the space, we have players that push forward quite a lot, especially Mainoo. I think, again, he was really key for England, both defensively and offensively against the Netherlands, because he does make these forward runs. And there was an excellent move against the Netherlands early on in the game, when I think it would have made it 2-1, with Mainoo picking up the ball between the lines, driving forward, and then finding Foden on the overlap with some incredible dribbling in tight spaces. And then if it wasn't for a really nice clearance off the line from, Dumfries on the line, then England could potentially have gone 2-1 up at that point. And they had a lot of chances. And there's another example with Kane dropping deep. If we look at their game against the Netherlands, I need to find the right image. Against the Netherlands, with Kane dropping deep into these positions, he can receive the ball in a lot of space. So Kane does have good passing. As Atham is saying, Kane has good passing ability. Now, in the second half against the Netherlands, I think he dropped deep way too much. And it did kind of disrupt England's attacking shape a bit too much, in my opinion, because he wasn't picking up the balls here between the lines, but he was dropping really, really far deep. Like maybe picking up the ball from the centre-backs, picking up the ball from the holding midfielders, and it was kind of leaving the Netherlands defence with no real threat, because Bellingham and Foden were starting to get a little bit more tired and weren't making forward runs as consistently. But with Kane dropping slightly deeper into these positions, it can create a lot of opportunities for England, because in this situation, Kane took a shot from outside the box. But if, for example, Van Dijk or Ake or someone steps off the defensive line to close him down, then you have a really nice through ball into Foden. But if they want to compact their defensive line, which is what we saw France do against Spain, if they want to compact their shape as much as possible, then you have a nice ball out wide into Saka. And then Saka in this situation would be in a 1v1. So 1v1s with Saka is where you want the ball to be. It's where you want England to create their chances from, and it's where they can be dangerous. So I think Kane dropping deep can be key for England. That is to say, if he does start the match, because if you have someone like Watkins who's constantly attacking in behind, then obviously that's going to be great for England as well. But I don't really know what the chances of Watkins starting are. So again, if Kane drops deep, I think England can find space between the lines, maybe disrupt this defensive block quite consistently. And then you have other players like Mainoo, Foden, Bellingham, all adding support between the lines and just giving England a little bit of these central clusters in the center of the pitch. Because England are creating these overloads in possession as well. They're not as aggressive or as intentional as Spain's overloads, because if you look at Spain's structure, they're quite obviously trying to get as many players as possible onto one side of the pitch to create these overloads, to find passing combinations, to disrupt the defensive block. But England, I feel like indirectly, maybe without even realizing they're doing it too intentionally, they do end up with a lot of players in close proximity as well, especially when Walker gets into the picture as well. And you have, for example, the Spanish defense all shifting over to this side. You can have Bellingham, Foden, Mainoo attacking forward. And you kind of have to pin these Spanish wingers back a little bit. But England, if they get the ball into these situations, obviously Carvajal's going to have to come a little bit closer, then there are options for them. And there are ways they can move forward. And I've seen it a couple times, for example, if Saka picks up the ball here, this was against Germany, I think, a lot of times. Cucurella, he has had a very good Euros, but a lot of people I see in the chat as well saying Cucurella is a little bit overrated, says Prod, or he's a little bit inconsistent at times. He does push forward quite a lot. And if Cucurella's out of time on these movements, then there's other options England can explore, with Foden attacking the half space or even Walker pushing forward, which is something that Spain do quite well with these overlapping fullbacks. But it's something England need to explore as well, because if England can push forward, then they can get a lot of players into the box. And then if they're able to get into here, then you have a lot of players ready to attack deep from deep positions. I think one of the issues for England, especially in the early stages of the Euros, was that they were maybe relying too much on crosses, but because there were so many players that wanted the ball to feet and were like deep between the lines here, as these crosses came into the box, there was no one here to head them. So We saw it with Saka's disallowed goal for offside, but as the defensive line shifts back really deep to try and stop and cover the goal, then cutbacks can be really dangerous for England because you have so many players making late runs onto the edge of the box. Maybe even Kane is running onto the edge of the box here, that you can end up with a little bit of space to finish the move. Maybe not with a header, but with a driven shot into the goal. But again, curious to know how you think England can create their chances going forward. So, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people saying stuff about Cucurella, but I think he's had a really good Euros because if you think about it, Cucurella, he had a decent season at Chelsea. It didn't set the world alight, especially towards the end of the season. I think he picked up his form quite a lot. But for Spain, he has been good. I know there's a few memes about Cucurella as well, but he has been pretty decent. Going forward as well, I think maybe his crossing hasn't been the best from these positions, but if he is able to create these 2v1s with Williams out wide, then his position can be difficult for England to stop, which I think the combination of, or the duel of Saka and Cucurella is going to be a really, really interesting one to analyze and to see how the game unfolds. So Ade saying, give the ball to Saka. I know that's your star boy, but yeah, I think I agree. Saka needs to be on the ball. He needs to create chances, and we saw it with England as well. If Saka's able to cut inside, similar to what Yamal likes to do on the opposite flank, then it opens up so many more windows for England to explore, because if Saka moves into these positions, you can have Walker out wide, Foden, Mainu, Bellingham, Kane, lots of players into the centre to link up play and maybe curl the shot onto the second post or something like that. I think that was a nice example of how Spain have been defending at these Euros as well, and how England can take advantage of this. Because if you look at, where is it? So Spain, they like to go 4-4-2, 4-5-1 when they're out of possession. And if you just consider this French attack here would be England. So in this case situation, maybe more likely to be on the right flank. But with who would it be? Saka and Walker in these positions, it can disrupt the defensive block. So we see the fullback likes to step off the line quite a lot. So it does free up space in behind that they could attack with through balls and different players attacking forward. But I think the key can be if England are able to get their fullbacks involved as well. So for example, in this situation here, this is actually how France were able to get their goal against Spain. So this is the build up to the match. We can see that Koundé is overlapped on the flank, so we can see him hugging the touchline and pushing forward, pinning Williams back, trying to stretch the pitch as much as possible, and that frees up a player like Dembele to pick up the ball between the lines. And it's very easy to see how this could potentially work for England as well, because just imagine that the player in the ball now is John Stones or even Declan Rice if he's picking up the ball here, or Mainu, playing it forward into Walker, who's overlapping and stretching Cucurella, not making it difficult for Cucurella to predict which players he needs to cover. And then you have Saka picking up the ball between the lines. And you can see if Saka picks up the ball here, then that's how you can create these chances. In this situation here, France picked up the ball and then switched it into Mbappe. England are more likely to try and keep the ball on the right flank unless Luke Shaw is playing and you have a little bit more support on the left flank. But if they keep play onto the right flank, it can be something dangerous that England can explore. So again, let me know what you think of these tactics. Do you think there's going to be any surprises? So a lot of people are asking about the software that I've been using as well. So this is the Football Meta software that I've been working on. Again, it's not available yet, but I'll hopefully try and make it available in the coming months, potentially for next season. But yeah, there's still a few things that we need to sort out. So, Angel, having to defend 80 meters from your goal against Dembele and he doing nothing is impressing. So, yeah, I think Spain did defend really, really well against this French team. They didn't offer too much going forward. But again, France, they had these combinations with Mbappe and Hernandez or Koundé and Dembele that were quite dangerous at the start of the match. But then if you watch my analysis that I did on the... on Spain versus France, Koundé stopped making these overlapping runs, and it just made it difficult for Dembele to find space, because then he was always outnumbered with Cucurella and maybe even Williams dropping deep, and it made it difficult for France to find space going forward. So I think if England want to do something similar, they need to get their fullbacks involved, and we did see it against the Netherlands. They had a lot of players pushing forward, and it can stretch the pitch, and it can create a lot of gaps that England can exploit. So Logic, you're saying Foden shouldn't start. I'm curious to know which player you think should start in his position. Spain's press is a lot better than the Netherlands. Yeah, I agree. And I think it took the Netherlands a little bit too long to figure out what England were trying to do. So again, in this example here, this was at the start in the first 35 minutes. When you're looking at the England, because of this box shape in the center, they were able to outnumber the Netherlands midfield because they had 3 players in the center. But I think that the trick for Netherlands was when they switched to a midfield 4, and they were able to stop this overload in the center. But if England are able to do this, so just imagine that player highlighted is Rodri, and you're picking up the ball behind Dani Olmo, there is space that England can exploit and can push forward. Again, because Spain like to press really high up the pitch with 3 players, I'm curious to see how this unfolds, because again, if you have Morata, Williams and Yamal against these front 3, it might be harder for England to build and break the first line. But if they do break the first line, then I think Spain are in a lot of trouble, because Olmo, Ruiz and Rodri will be outnumbered in the center. And unless they want to push both their centre-backs forward to try and level out the centre of the pitch, then it becomes easier for England to find balls into Saka, who can be in a 1v1, especially if Laporte's pushed up over here. Again, there is space for England to exploit if Spain adopt this aggressive press. But I'm curious to see if they do. I think they might be a little bit more defensive. Maybe drop Yamal, or maybe keep Yamal and Morata, who's a little bit more dangerous from counterattacks. Sacrifice Williams slightly, try and stop these overloads, especially maybe with Foden pushing out wide. And try and keep this structure here with Rodri on Bellingham, Olmo on Declan Rice, and Ruiz on Mainoo. Something like this to try and level out the centre. So Harry, love the vids. I would like Mainoo to cook Rodri as he has done a couple times this season. I agree. I would love to see your boy Mainoo dominate Rodri as he has in the FA Cup final. Again, I owe Mainoo and all you Man United fans a big apology because I disregarded... You know what? It's your fault because you hyped up Antony so much that you just ruined any perception I had of any Man United players. So it's not my fault if I didn't think Mainoo was that good. But I hold my hands up. He is unbelievable. Honestly, I think he's been one of England's best player, if not the best player since he's come into the team. So they're not overrated. France created 2 chances because of Spain mistakes, and you don't need to go forward if you're winning. You have to control the pace of your game. So yeah, there's. I'm curious who you mean overrated. If you mean Spain or France overrated, I think France. I feel like France were maybe overrated considering how they performed, because a lot of people thought France were favorites at these Euros, but they haven't really been able to. They never really displayed anything that impressive at these Euros. I mean, if you only score 1 goal from open play, then there's something that you need to consider what's happening. Logic, what team do I support? I'm a Chelsea fan, so obviously I want to see my boy Palmer on the pitch as quickly as possible. And I do like what you were saying with Palmer over Foden. That was something that I wanted to see at the start of the Euros, especially because Foden wasn't playing very well. I think his best game was against the Netherlands in the semi-final. I would love to see Palmer. I think this is a position he'd be really dangerous for Chelsea in as well. The link up with Palmer and Saka. But at that point, you need someone to attack him behind. And if it's Kane, Palmer and Saka, Bellingham, then again, you end up with just too many players between the lines that I think it doesn't quite work. So again, I think, yeah, Palmer will almost certainly be on the bench, but I think he should come on pretty early on into the second half if England aren't performing. So that was just a quick breakdown. I wanted to get your thoughts on predictions and on which players and what team you think is going to come out on top in this match, because again, I think the poll is now saying 57% Spain, which I think makes sense. A lot of people are putting Spain as favourites. I personally think Spain are definitely favourites coming into this match. But if you look at the individual players, England have so much talent in this team that if they can just find a little bit more cohesion and chemistry between their rotations and the players that they have available, I really think England can surprise everyone. And again, I see a lot of hate for England, a lot of people not wanting them to make it this far, but they made it and they're here, and now they have a chance to prove what they can do against the best team in the competition. And I think that's going to be something that works in England's favour, because it does remove a little bit of the pressure. Obviously, there is a lot of pressure on England to win. There's a lot of pressure on Spain to win. It's a European final. Obviously, both teams really, really want to win. But when you're going up against the best team in the competition by far, then it's not too bad if as long as you play well and you show that you really, really want to win. I don't know. I think it could play into England's favour. But anyway, thank you so much all for joining the stream. I didn't want to make this too long. I just wanted to break down the tactics as I see the game unfolding, the types of spaces that I think both teams can exploit. And yeah, again, a lot of people wanting to drop Bellingham, drop Foden, Trent at left wing back. I feel like Trent has taken a bit of a hit in this match because he started in a position that wasn't his, and he didn't have the best performance. Mainoo's obviously been outstanding since he's come in, but I feel like Trent has been treated a little bit poorly because he was played out of position, and maybe he could be used in another position that could be more dangerous for England, especially if Walker's not playing well. Maybe even Trent as a right back or left wing back could work, but again, he's right-footed, so I don't know if you end up with a similar situation than Trippier, where you get onto the end of the pitch and then he just turns back and tries to put the ball back into the box and find space to attack forward like that. So I don't know. I think, I feel sorry for Trent because he didn't necessarily play badly. He was just played out of position, and he lost his place in the team as a consequence. So attacking combinations in the half space can break England's defense. Yeah, so we did see that earlier with a clip with Fabio and Ruiz when they're able to pick up the ball in the half spaces. It can be really, really dangerous, especially because, again, Spain create these big overloads in possession on one side of the pitch, and then it does free up a player in behind. And in these situations, then they were able to get the ball back across the box, and they weren't able to score, but again, if they're not careful, if they're not able to stop these overloads and stop these runs in behind, then it can be difficult for England. But I think that's why their back three formation could play into their favor, because you essentially go man for man. If you're in a 3-4-3 and you're against a 4-3-3, then you can go man for man, especially when the opposition pushes their 5 offensive players, because Spain will switch to a 2-3-5 or 3-2-5 offensive shape. So it does make it easier for England to understand which players they need to cover. Doesn't make it easier for them to actually cover them, but it makes it a little bit easier to understand the movements and the rotations that Spain are trying to do. And because England and Spain, they both shift a lot of players over to one side of the pitch or the other, I think defensively speaking as well, they can counter each other in that sense as well. So if Spain do push a lot of players over to one flank, England will be comfortable trying to stop these overloads, but they also do have cover on the opposite flank in case they want to switch play quickly, which Spain will probably attempt to do. How would I stop Rodri? Asks Apov. I don't know. I think that's a question that everyone has been trying to ask for a few years now. But we did see it in the FA Cup final with Mainoo. I think, again, giving him a little, not too much space, just closing him down, and maybe not even closing down Rodri, but closing down his options as much as possible. So that was one thing I remember. I can't remember what interview it was that I was looking at, but it was how you countered Messi and how a certain manager wanted to counter Messi in a certain period of the year, and they did it really well. I think they beat Barcelona when he did it, and it wasn't stop Messi individually, but it was just give Messi no options. So every time Messi had the ball, maybe Messi had a lot of space to receive the ball, but there was just no one around him that he could pass to, and it made it a little bit difficult for him to play. And who's it saying? Yeah, Ali, like, stop the ball getting to Rodri. So if you not necessarily stop Rodri once he has the ball, but you stop him from having options and you stop the ball getting to him in the first place, so just compact the center of the pitch as much as possible, then that could be a way to counter him. It's something that you probably should do against all world-class players, is just try and remove them from the game as much as possible, because again, if he's on the ball, then it's going to be really, really difficult. So Atham, would England play counter-attacking football? Again, I think it depends on how aggressive this Spanish team is and how much they want to push their players forward. I think England will resort to counterattacks at times, because you kind of have to against Spain, because they are going to control the game. They are going to push a lot of players forward. So if you want to take all your chances, a lot of your chances are going to be from counterattacking situations. And we did see that they struggled against them, especially against Georgia, when they had all these players over to on one side of the pitch. It didn't take long for Georgia to just switch play. When Spain do tilt to one side of the pitch, if you're able to regain the ball and switch it, then you have so much space on the opposite flank that you can exploit. Georgia did it. France were able to do it a couple times. In the group stages, Croatia, I know that they played really badly in that game, but a couple times they did create a couple of opportunities by switching play. I think the only ones that did nothing was Italy. They played really, really badly that game. But yeah, Logic, I don't think England have the transitional ability to counter well. Again, it depends who's playing, but Kane is not the best transitional player. because he's not going to push the defensive line back. He's going to compact it even more by dropping deep. So it just depends on how much space you're given on the opposite flank. Maybe you want Spain to tilt to the left, or sorry, to the right, onto their right side of the pitch. So you want Ruiz to come over to this side. And then if England are able to regain the possession from the left flank, then this diagonal is much more dangerous. Because if you're going from left to right, you end up with Mainoo, Foden and Saka. But if you're going from right to left, you end up with Trippier, Bellingham and Rice, who are not as quick and not as dynamic going forward. Yeah, Forrest, if England want to counter, then Kane is definitely not the option. But I don't think England want to counter. Obviously, I stand to be corrected. I'm curious to see how Southgate lines up. But I think England will try and do what they've tried to do in their previous matches. So, Harry, I think Walker will be hyped to play against Williams, much like he enjoys his duels with Vinny. England much better with 3 at the back. I agree. Since England have switched to a back 3, they've been so much more dangerous, so much more cohesive. They've been able to get way more players forward. Because again, I did an analysis of England at the start of the Euros, and when they were in a back 4, it was just so difficult for them to get players forward because you had Kane, Bellingham, Rice. It was Trent instead of Mainoo at the start. But because they just everyone wanted the ball to feet, it just made it really, really difficult for England to find players in behind. And essentially with Kane dropping deep, Foden picking up the ball here, Bellingham picking up the ball here, you really only had Saka that was ready to attack in behind. He was the only player that was always hugging the touchline and ready to attack in behind and maybe even take on his man. And these players were just way too deep, and just you ended up with this massive cluster of players at the back that just really didn't do anything and just separated England's attacks way too much. But yeah, like you were saying, Harry, I agree. Since they've switched to a back 3, so many more options have opened up because, yes, you can defend with a back 5, but you're playing with one less defender. In this situation, I think it is more of a 3 than it is a 5 for England. And you do get that extra support up top. And it allows Bellingham and Foden to play in more natural positions because we know Foden wasn't working out here on the left. So if he starts in this position, he can be more dangerous. And he definitely has been more dangerous starting in the right inside channel. And again, this central cluster of Rice, Mainoo, Foden and Bellingham can be really dangerous. How do you stop Mainoo? I think maybe similar way to what we were saying against Rodri. Maybe to try and remove him from the game. I think what makes Mainoo so good is his counter-pressing, especially against the Netherlands. Just his ability to regain the ball for England was so important, so crucial in the way we were able to control the first half of the match. That definitely, yeah, if you want to stop Mainoo, I don't know. Do you man mark him as well? Because I think if he is man marked, it's going to be Ruiz probably, and I think Mainoo wins that. I generally think Mainoo wins that duel. So Watkins and Palmer should start. Yeah, I think they deserve to get a decent amount of minutes. Again, we don't know if they are going to start. Probably not. I think we're going to see a pretty similar lineup to this. I think even Luke Shaw starting is a big doubt because we know that Southgate doesn't want to change things if he can afford not to. So yeah, I think Watkins and Palmer will come on. They will be used, but they won't start. I could be proven wrong, but yeah. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I really enjoyed that. I hope you guys got a good understanding of what we need to look out for in this match. Obviously, both teams could play completely different football to what we analysed today, but we've seen pretty consistent patterns from both teams. We've seen Spain with their fullbacks and their overloads in possession, and we've seen England with this box midfield in their last match and trying to get a little bit more players forward with Saka and Mainoo. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and again, good luck to England in the final, I guess. It's England versus Europe. That's what it feels like. But yeah, take care, everyone. Thank you so much again for watching. And if you haven't, please leave a like and subscribe for more. It really helps the channel grow and push these streams out to more people. So yeah, thank you, everyone, and speak soon.